Welcome to Writers Not Writing, your weekly book podcast where your favorite authors take a break from writing to talk about the one thing they love to do. Before we start this episode, we would like to get through a couple of announcements. We're currently celebrating the release of Jacob Brundle's debut novel, The Augur of Shadows. So we're currently hosting a giveaway to help him celebrate. You can find all this information on how to enter the giveaway, as well as a link to the book itself on our Twitter page at WNW Podcast 1. Today's episode is an interview with award-winning fantasy author Jane Alvey Harris to talk about her latest novel, Secret Keeper, in the My Myth Triology. So, how does it feel to have this new book out?
It's exciting that it's out. It feels a little daunting just because I've kind of gotten to this place where after that one took a lot out of me, and they're personal. The plot and the things that happen and the relationships of the characters in the book. A lot of them are drawn from my real life. And that one, people either love or hate cliffhangers. And a lot of people are like, why did she end this in a cliffhanger? That's just a ploy to get people to read it. But in all honesty, that's the way that event ended in real life. And it was just, I got to this point and I was just at this stopping point where things went really wrong. And, and it, and then writing about it too, nothing, I know the end of this story and everything else has moved on, but that one situation, how the book ended, it kind of just stopped. And so honestly, while I'm excited and thrilled that Secret Keeper is out, since March 21st, I really have written maybe 30 pages in primed. So I'm a little bit daunted about that. Yeah.
So, and do you feel like getting out the second book was easier than getting out your first book, Riven?
It was easier just because I knew what I was doing. So the process wasn't as scary. With Ribbon, I'd never done any of that before. This time I have a publicist, I have a marketing person, I have, the designer, I was working with a new editor, but we worked really well together. So definitely the process and, the business side of things was easier to get it done. And, Ribbon took me 4 years to write, and Secret Keeper took about a year. So yeah, the whole process was definitely easier.
And not only are your books coming out, but they're coming out and they're winning a lot of awards. I've seen that Secret Keeper has won the National Indie Excellence Award, and I've seen that the first novel, Riven, has won a Moonbeam Gold Medal for young adult fiction. So how does that make you feel as a writer, seeing that your work is being awarded with a lot of awards?
It's so validating. I was counting my awards the other day, and between the two books, there are 13 awards. The latest ones, Riven just won the Reader's Favorite Gold Medal for young adult fantasy, and Secret Keeper won the bronze for fairy tale and myth in young adult. And honestly, as a self-published author, it's huge because so many people in the writing community, at least, tend to look down their noses at people who are self-published because they see, agents and publishers and editors, in-house editors, as the gatekeepers for what is good and what isn't good. But not all authors, are in the same position. And I myself chose to self-publish because I had offers from agents who wanted either straight fantasy or straight realistic contemporary. And I chose to stick with doing both, with having, a cross genre kind of thing, because it is a story of recovery and healing from PTSD, from childhood sexual abuse. And so many victims of CSA use fantasy to cope with their reality. So in choosing to go that route, I did kind of, close myself off to some opportunities, because it is monumentally difficult if you are not easily categorized to, to get major distribution deals and to find that easy niche. So going on my own, it was hard. A lot of people didn't take me seriously. They thought that I was just doing it because, I couldn't get into one of the big 5 publishing houses. And so getting these awards, honestly, for me personally, I mean, that's not why I write, but to have that validation is huge.
Yeah, and you talk a lot. You just talked about that mixing of genre. So
Mm-hmm.
how do you feel as if mixing those lines between the fantasy elements of your novel as well as the realistic elements? Do you feel like bringing in those fantasy elements allow you to talk about these really heavy topics like PTSD more easier than if you just did it just straight realistic style?
I do. And just because for me personally, that's how I like, I am a girl who loves fantasy, but I also love horror, and I also love gritty, crime novels. And I love all those things, but it can't be too in my face, or I get triggered. So I don't want to be a snowflake here, but it's hard for me. I have to be able to remove myself. And so not only reading, but also writing, using the fantasy elements, it kind of gave me a safe place to process things that otherwise were too real for me. And my therapist actually is the one who first suggested that I take the scenes in my head and write them down. And that's what I did. And she was the very first person to ever read the completed manuscript. It never was meant to start, to be a book. It was just kind of helping me process some things, not just my stuff, but other things that I'd been given, things that, that I knew about from people who are close to me. And it really was a way. I also used, there are scenes in both books so far and in Primed that I've taken from hypnosis sessions, from EMDR sessions, and just, from therapy sessions. And it is kind of like hypnosis itself even is like you are sitting back and watching things happen on a movie screen, or sitting in a train and watching things go by with the landscape. So they can't harm you that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So these the My Myth Trilogy is more or less kind of like a personal journey for yourself, and we as readers kind of sing into that world that has helped you as a person grow, right?
Absolutely. And I don't claim all of Emily's, everything that happened to her, all of her experiences in the book, but she does definitely have my personality. And I did take the liberty of writing my kids into the book. Emily's siblings are my kids, Jacob, Aiden, and Claire. My therapist, Nancy, is my therapist, Nancy. So yeah, it does get pretty personal. And everything that happens, might not have happened to me, but has happened. I talk when I speak with parenting groups, or even with writers who are interested in, blending fantasy with reality. I talk about how an outcry witness. Okay, so let me tell. An outcry witness is someone who first hears allegations of abuse. And I have been an outcry witness for at least 12 or 13 men and women. And sometimes that gets heavy. Like, these are unsolicited. So while not everything happened to me, I don't claim all her stories. They're all stories that I have been given. So kind of woven in there. And yeah, a lot of the relationships are really real.
Okay. So. Yeah. So, you have 2 novels out. So, what has the process been with getting the last and final novel in this trilogy? Are you already started working on it, or are you still kind of relaxing on the recent release of Secret Keeper?
Well, so I have definitely taken a few months off, and it's funny because right after, on the same day that Secret Keeper came out, my youngest got her driver's license. And it was like, those are 2 wonderful things, but it kind of left me in this place like, oh my gosh, like, my kids don't need me anymore, which they still do. And like, this whole, it's so kind of anticlimactic after it comes out. So I kind of went into a little bit of a depression, honestly. And I didn't have any initiative or any motivation, any inspiration to write. So I have taken a couple months off, and I have to tell you, like, just in the last few weeks, it's all come flooding back. So I really am learning to respect that time of recovery, maybe. And maybe not all authors need that. I hear a lot of times, oh, it's your job. Just, you have to sit down and do your job, or write 2,000 words a day, whether you feel it or not. But for me, and every author is so different and has such a different process. But for me, I needed to step away from the series for a while. I have written, and I'm just finishing up final edits on a horror story, an adult horror story, that is actually about, whenever I have nightmares, they're usually about my current work in progress. And I had a doozy a couple months ago. So I wrote a horror story about it, and I'm finishing up edits on that. And now I am, just the last few days, I've been doing character sketches. Part of my writing process is painting the scenes and the characters from my head. So I've started painting the shield maidens from the second book, and they're of course in the third book as well. And I am just itching to get back to writing primed. So I talk a lot, Cam. I do, but
you're fine. You're fine.
Okay. You can edit that out.
But so have you picked up any hobbies in between these kind of months that you've been taking off writing?
Oh my gosh, I got a full-time job. So I honestly, I started thinking, I don't know if I'll ever be able to write again. It was such a weird feeling. So I started looking for a part-time job, and I applied as a tutor at a learning center, and they offered me the full-time position of assistant director, and I took it. And so I've been working my tail off for the last 3 months, and now I'm like, and I love it. It's so fun. But yeah, so in addition to that, I love, can I talk about this for a second? I love going to film festivals, and Riven has actually been optioned for a film. And so I'm kind of dipping my toes in those waters of getting to know a little bit more about how films are made, what I'm producing a film, just so I can get to know people and kind of network and stuff. Cause I don't want to be like totally ignorant of the process if anything happens with this. So I've been going to some film festivals. I've been doing some signings. I have a lot of panels and workshops and things coming up. So not any new hobbies, except for maybe the producing films one. Yeah. That counts as a hobby. But yeah, I've been keeping pretty busy.
Can you tell us about kind of the short you just said you were producing? Can you tell us any information about it?
About the short? Yes, it's called 5 Families, and it's...
You said 5 Families?
Yes. Do you know
Okay.
about this?
No.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Five Families. It's a mob family show movie. But they are producing producing a short that is the first like scene from the movie. And then, we'll use that to raise money and get investors and those kinds of, it will go to film festivals and all that kind of thing. So it's kind of exciting.
Yeah. So
I'm living my best life, Cam.
So Prime, once Prime comes out, your My Myth trilogy, I guess, will be complete, or trilogy will be complete.
Yeah.
So do you have any future plans working on any other novels?
I do. One of them that is just like always nagging me persistently with ideas is called Anatomy of a Curse. And it is a modern retelling of Rapunzel, but from the witch's point of view. And it's all about how she cursed this man because she was in love with him and he broke her heart. And then and how the curse that she puts on him ties her to him so tightly that she just cannot get away from him. And he has a child and she is in love with this child and wants to protect her. So I'm working on that. And, well, not yet, but I'm going to. And then there's also a novel called Obligate that it would be adult, and it would also blend genres. Like I just can't apologize. I see the world in fantasy and humor and horror and all those things, but and it's about kind of this femme fatale, like late 20s high society girl who is just a bitch. And the masters from outside of life, they interrupt her life and take her and say, you can either stay here and serve us for the rest of eternity and not have a life on Earth or anything, or you can go back to Earth in another body and pay off all the karmic debt that you've accrued. And so she gets put back in a different, like a body like mine, like a mid-40s single mother of three, slight weight kind of thing, and she has to pay off all this debt that she's accrued by helping men and women through transitions in their relationships. So it's pretty thought out. But I know I've got so many things to do. There are not enough hours in the day.
Most definitely. So I may be going just like completely out of order with my questions. Okay. I'm kind of all over the place, but is Riven kind of was that your first experience with writing, or have you already been writing for years beforehand, but Riven was just kind of the first project that you published?
No, I hadn't been writing. Okay, so I've always loved to write, but more than that, I've always loved to tell stories. And there's a scene in Riven where Emily gathers up all the figurines and tells stories to her siblings with them. And that's what I used to do as, a 10 or 11-year-old with my younger siblings. There are 7 kids in my family, and I used to be in charge of telling them bedtime stories, and I loved it. I also just love writing. I would write anybody's essays in college, and I would get, they would get top scores. It doesn't matter. I just knew what the professors wanted to hear. I'd had some poetry published and, a couple articles in the university magazine, but I had never, I didn't plan to write a book. I wasn't, no, I hadn't. But I have always loved writing and always loved reading. But truth be told, after the first draft of Riven, and I it was off to the editor. Like, she crucified it. I did not know what I was doing. So I learned a lot, and I continued to learn.
Were there any scenes that you kind of particularly liked that just didn't make it into the final copy of it?
There probably are, but I don't remember. And I have little all over the place. I am not an organized person, but I have, little Word files all over the place with just little scenes, because that's what I do. I don't, I just see scenes really vividly and obsess about them until, like they have a soundtrack, and then I write those, and then I connect them together. So, and that works at least with this trilogy because it is so personal and I know what happens. I don't know if it's going to work for another book, but it worked for this one. So yeah.
So
I don't think there are. I mean, yeah, maybe, but I learned to let go. You have to let go when you're writing, right? Because it's slash and you're at 120,000 words and you have to get down to 100, to 72,000. Like, you can't be sentimental about it. So there you go. My favorite is, storytelling. My brain, I have the best most kick-ass imagination in the world. So I don't know. I love to daydream. I love to, I have a great imagination. Yeah, definitely not sitting down every day with a word count. And I heard an author, I want to say it was Maggie Stiefvater, that said, you're going to write. Can you hear my cat? He is so annoying. Okay, sorry about that. I tried to throw him outside and my daughter brought him back in. Anyway, so Maggie Stiefvater said, you're going to write the way you live your life. So, and I'm the kind of person who I have to be out in the world, like experiencing things. And that's how I get my inspiration. And then I come back and use it to write. And it's so true. Like, I traveled a lot while I was writing The Secret Keeper. And so, parts of the First Realm are from, like, in the royal city, parts of that are from Greece. And then, but also parts of it are from, like, the rainforest in Costa Rica. And the people that travel with me are like, oh my gosh, I remember that, because I just put everything in there. I'm so inspired just by living my life and the people I meet and, the places I go. So no, I don't sit down. I'm not disciplined. I don't know if I ever will be, and I don't really care. There you go. Yeah. Oh yeah. Definitely. And they're not all the same, but I love Neil Gaiman. His Ocean at the End of the Lane just knocked my socks off. Philip Pullman, I really like, because, he's writing with an agenda, especially in the Book of Dust and in his Dark Materials series. And I love the way that he is able to use allegory. So he is definitely making a statement, but you don't even care because the story is so magical and transportive. I love him. I also love one of my favorite author is Wallace Stegner, and he didn't write, he wrote just adult fiction. It's not even very plot oriented. It's definitely psychological, and it's all, about thought processes and observations of life. But I really love, it's like he's been in my head. I love the way he writes. So Those are three off the top of my head. And of course, I always talk about Guillermo del Toro because like he's amazing, and he knows, he knows fantasy, he knows elves, he knows fairies, he gets it. So his Pan's Labyrinth has had a huge inspirational effect on my writing. I just love the way he tells stories. So, so visual. So yeah. Well, can I say something? Because you asked before about my writing process, and I have a really cool one where I will write, and I told you before that I don't write like in chronological order. I just am writing scenes that are really vivid to me and then connecting them. So I might write one that's 3/4 of the way through the book, and I kind of have a general idea of where it's going to go, but then I'll go back to like maybe 2 or 3 chapters in. And of course, I won't know which chapter they are until I get through with everything and put them. But so I write them, and then I have one of my best friends, I read every word that I write out loud to her. She listens to them and, has a like visceral response. And then she reads them and does some editing, not like copy editing or anything, but she's like this metaphysical person. So she's like taught me a lot about magic and those kinds of energy, those kinds of things that I needed an education in. And so then I get them back and I rewrite them. And then when everything's done, I send them to my editor, and then we start kind of the same process. So I just wanted to touch on that. Mm-hmm. Yes, I am. But well, that's the same thing, right? Though. Um, yeah, I listen to audiobooks, and I also try to read a lot of indie books because I just want to support indie authors. I just finished one of the coolest things I get to do is blurb other books for other authors. And I just finished one that is like a crime thriller, and another one that was a romance I don't typically read romance. So it was kind of fun for me to get out of my my little box and read something new. I'm also still in the middle of it's Esther Perel. She wrote a book called State of Affairs. I'm listening to that, and now I'm involved in the Great American Read with the Dallas Public Library next month. So I'm reading 100 Years of Solitude for that. Yeah. I wish I remembered right now, but you made me forget it. I'll have to look it up. Yeah, me too. My next event is in, oh, well, I do. So I have let me look and see, because I know. I just posted about it. So I'm doing Indie Author Day at the Dallas Public Library on October 13th. On the 20th, there's a panel and workshop for the Great American Read, and that's the books that made us. On the 27th and 28th, I'll be at the Texas Book Festival in Austin. And then the next one after that is the Miami Book Fair in November.